Leo Tolstoy opens Anna Karenina with the famous line that all happy families are alike, each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. In the same manner, all the top investment bankers I've come across have the same great habits, while every bad analyst is bad through a variety of different bad ways. Knowing how to build complex financial models is critical in banking, but here's the truth that no one knows until you actually work in the industry. The thing that makes senior bankers trust you, staff you on good deals, and promote you is not just about your technical skills. What really makes you stand out are your soft skills. I'm talking about how you communicate, how you manage expectations, how you consistently show up, and how much easier you make life for your associates and VPs without them having to ask. You may not believe this, but when I worked at JP Morgan, the analysts who got the best deals were not always the most technical. Now, of course, being technical is important, but I know many bankers who were kind of average at best at modeling, but they handled the little things that made the team run smoothly. And above everything else, senior bankers liked them. They were easy to work with and were the people you wanted around at 2 a.m. when nothing was going right. In this video, I'm going to break down the 5 most important soft skills that actually matter. And these are the habits that make seniors trust you and pick you repeatedly. And even though these are soft skills I picked up from banking, they're going to be applicable to almost any job and industry. I promise you that if you really pay attention to this video and apply the lessons I share, you'll be able to fast track your career and move ahead of your peers, even if you're not the smartest person on your team or in the room, especially if you execute consistently on the 5th skill on the list. And by the way, if you're watching this video because you're trying to understand how analysts succeed because you're trying to break into banking yourself, consider working with me and my team in my mentorship program, the Banking Accelerator. You'll get one-on-one and group coaching with myself and former bankers who have done this job on real deal teams. And if you're interested, book a call with my team using the link in the description below. With that said, let's jump in. One of the most crucial pieces of advice I received before starting banking came from an alumni who had worked in the industry for over a decade. He told me that there were 2 types of analysts: energy drainers and energy multipliers. And if you're the former, you're going to get a shitty bonus. The important insight about this advice is that people can be energy drainers without even knowing it. And to give you an example, let's go through one of the most unintentional ways analysts drain energy: complaining. When you're working 80 to 100-hour weeks, you're tired, cranky, and haven't seen your friends in weeks, and things don't go your way, it's super easy to complain, right? Wrong. If you said yes, that's where you have to change your mentality. I made it a rule for myself to never complain to my associates and seniors, and the perspective that worked for me was focusing on gratitude and knowing that 1,000 other candidates would have happily accepted the job I was doing. Of course, it's okay to vent and commiserate with your fellow analysts, but generally to your associates and senior bankers, don't ever complain. And if you have something negative to say, present it as feedback during a one-on-one and make sure you're presenting a potential solution or saying it in a constructive way. As an analyst or associate, you're on the bottom of the totem pole, and even if your MD says to add logos instead of company names at 1 a.m. and you feel like it's unnecessary, you need to tap into some kind of perspective like gratitude that prevents you from blowing up in the bullpen. One of the analysts I started with was super smart. He came from an Ivy League school and was extremely technical. But once he started complaining too often in public, it drained his deal team's energy, and word always spreads from your associates to your MDs about what it's like working with an analyst, and you'll eventually build a bad reputation that leads to a downward spiral that's really hard to recover from. Other examples of unintentional energy draining habits include needing excessive hand-holding instead of being resourceful and first trying to figure things out on your own since everyone's busy, and then being socially closed off and not making the effort to build relationships with your teammates since great banking cultures are built on camaraderie. On the flip side, I want to provide some perspective on being an energy multiplier. Contrary to what most people think, you don't need to be super outgoing or the one cracking jokes all the time. You need to play to whatever your strengths are. For example, you can be a silent stabilizer who keeps a neutral presence when comments flood in, and by not adding extra emotional noise, your calmness lowers everyone's tension. Or you can be the optimist who makes comments like, with the next draft of this 70-page deck tonight, tomorrow gets a whole lot easier. For For me personally, I tried to be the social glue in a sense, especially in my second year where I tried to really connect with all the analysts and associates by asking about their lives and problems outside of work. And in that way, felt like someone who really cared a lot about them. And while a lot of my teammates had problems with each other, I didn't really have an issue with anyone and even wrote cards for all of my coworkers on my last day. Banking is one of the few jobs where you will 100% see your team more than your mom, dad, girlfriend, boyfriend, and dog combined because you're going to be working 80 to 100-hour weeks. Be someone who multiplies energy instead of draining energy, and you'll find yourself working on billion-dollar deals. Let's next go into our second soft skill. One of the fastest ways analysts gain trust is through clear, proactive communication, which sounds obvious, but let me tell you why a lot of analysts struggle with this and how the best analysts are masters. First of all bankers hate silence and not knowing what's happening, and they don't want to chase analysts for updates. And if they have to ask where something stands, the analyst already feels less reliable in their minds. More than that though, senior bankers love it when they are provided proactive updates even before they were ready to even ask, so it feels like you're reading their minds, and that's the level you really want to get to. Analysts who are bad with their communication often struggle for the following reasons. They think their updates are too small to be significant, they're afraid to admit they're behind or stuck, or they assume seniors already know what's happening. Pretty much all of this is based on not wanting to bother your associates or senior bankers because you think you're doing the right thing by not bothering them. Now, of course, you don't want to tell your MD every time you finish one slide in an 80-page deck, but as a general rule, you want to use your judgment and over-communicate and have them tell you to do less versus under-communicate. I remember one time during my second week in banking, I was spending hours and hours on a Saturday in the office trying to find historical estimates for a private company. And when my associate asked me later on that night for an update, I told her how little I got done. And it turned out I was looking for something that just doesn't exist. And she said I should have communicated to her faster. And that made me feel pretty dumb. So here are some rules you can follow that the best analysts do all the time. First, whenever you get an assignment, respond as soon as you see the email that you're on it, and in banking, that means within a few minutes of getting the email. Second, if you ever are stuck after exhausting your own research and asking other analysts, create a list of questions and send them to your associate immediately. And then third, always provide an update either after getting a meaningful amount of work done or at the end of the night to whoever you're reporting directly to with how much you've got done and what you plan to do next with details on timing. If you can consistently do these three things, you'll be golden. To give you an example of this, during one of my live sell-side deals, we had an executive director who was notorious for jumping between meetings and not checking his email for hours. One afternoon, the client sent a huge round of comments that changed a lot of our model, valuation pages, and our appendix, and I sent a quick note saying I was already on it and would have the next draft ready in an hour. That simple message helped my associate and VP relax because they knew someone had it under control, and little updates like this really help you become the analyst bankers can rely on because you remove uncertainty. Doing this consistently day in and day out is what gets you staffed on better deals. Technical skills matter, but you build trust with seniors through proactive communication because they assume the rest of your work is solid. Skill number 3 is owning your work from start to finish, which is where analysts genuinely separate themselves. The most important thing I want you to take away from this section is to have the mindset of making all of your work client ready. The number one biggest mistake new or bad analysts make is not checking their work carefully enough, and then that leads the associate they're working with to get frustrated seeing a lot of preventable errors. You need to feel like when you send a PowerPoint or model to your associate that it's not just them reviewing, it's the client and millions of dollars that are on the line, which might sound stressful, but trust me, it's more stressful getting a list of 20 mistakes you could have easily prevented versus thinking in that mindset and getting a great job that just fixed this one thing on page 25 from your associate or your MD. So step number 1 is having that client-ready mindset. Step 2 is how to actually do that like a top analyst. And let me walk you through that. First, you need to understand that every little detail matters. From having an extra space in the footnotes on page 67 to forgetting to update the table of contents after changing a title. All of this matters in banking where perfection is not impossible. It's a requirement because clients are paying millions of dollars. Second, I always recommend when first going through your work to focus on accuracy versus speed. even if time is of the essence. One example is when you're spreading comps and copy pasting from a 10K. Best practice is to always copy paste the numbers into Excel instead of hard coding them in because it's so easy to press the wrong number on your keypad. This may be a little bit slower, but if you get one number wrong, you need to re-update the entire slide, and that takes even more time in the long run. Third, after sending out a draft and receiving comments, I would always go through each comment, highlight it when it was finished, and then after making all the changes, double check that each comment was implemented, which is honestly painstakingly slow, but again, faster in the long run. The bankers you work with will 100% remember if your work is sloppy because trust will be broken and your reputation falls fast. One of the biggest disasters I witnessed happened because an analyst mislabeled a file, and a VP grabbed what he thought was the final version of the deck, printed 5 copies, and took it to a meeting with an MD. Half the numbers were old, and one chart had been deleted 2 drafts earlier. The fallout from that one mistake lasted months, and the analyst involved never recovered trust with that VP again. It sounds dramatic, but that is the reality of banking. When you mess up, you are putting someone else senior in a position where they look unprepared in front of a client or senior bankers, and that's why top analysts are obsessive about the details and make their work client ready. Real quick before we move on to the next soft skill, if you're interested in breaking into banking and want my newsletter series on my best advice for how to break into banking completely for free, check it out in the link in the description below. The next skill is something you'll need for the rest of your career, and it's being coachable, which means knowing how to recover from your mistakes, because no matter how great you are as an analyst, you will 100% make mistakes. A lot of people think being coachable just means taking feedback well, but in banking, it's much deeper than that. Being coachable is about how fast you adapt, how you respond under pressure, and whether your team can trust that you won't make the same mistake twice, because banking moves insanely fast. The most important thing you need to remember is that your mistake is not what defines you, it's how you handle it that does. And let's go into how to actually recover from all your mistakes. Step number 1 is to own it immediately and fully if it's your fault. Don't blame the comments, the draft, or other people or the process. Say something like, "Thank you for flagging and I should have caught it. I'll fix it right away." Step 2, fix it fast and thoroughly. When you correct the mistake, redo everything around it. If a title is wrong on one chart, double check every chart. If a formula is off in one tab of the model, check all dependencies. And the goal here is to make your fix stronger than your mistake. Next, understand the root cause. Ask yourself if you rushed or misunderstood the task so that you can prevent the error from happening again in the future. Step 4 is to bring a solution, not just an apology. For example, you could say something like, "Updated the model, rechecked the sensitivity tables, and added a note so this doesn't happen again." Last but not least, because this is the most important step, show improvement in your next work and drafts. Bankers don't expect perfection with every draft, but they do expect growth, and I highly recommend you create an error log, either as a Word doc or on paper, that you can skim through from time to time to remind yourself what to do better in the future. Now, you don't need to systematically think like this for every single tiny little mistake you make because there's going to be so many, but you should 100% make sure there aren't common patterns in your mistakes that you can easily avoid in the future. The last soft skill is one that can change your entire career trajectory. And the skill is to gradually start doing the work of your direct manager. And if you're able to execute on this, you'll be a shoo-in for promotions and the best deals as an analyst. What this means is for analysts, thoughtfully take mental notes on what your associate does and do their job. And let's actually dive into that. Associates have to think like they're in a game of chess. The MD provides guidance on what they're looking for, but associates need to figure out how to organize a deck, create the shell, and how to make a pitch compelling to their client. They have to understand the bigger picture behind the deck and the client's goals, and then how to break it all down into tasks for an analyst. This means as an analyst, instead of just doing what you're told, you begin asking yourself why you're doing it. You wonder what story the associate is trying to tell. You question how changes affect the rest of the deck. You understand that updating EBITDA margins on page 5 also affects changes to charts on page 9 and summary metrics on page 33. When you understand the bigger picture, your work automatically becomes sharper and more aligned with what senior bankers are trying to accomplish. Analysts who think ahead make associates' lives easier. Associates start forwarding comments to them without having to send long instructions because they know the analyst will understand what needs to be done without any need to micromanage them and wasting time. Let's also go into an example for associates. As an associate, you need to start thinking and working like a VP, which means running point on deals and starting to build client relationships. One of the best associates on my team actually started introducing her contacts to one of our executive directors to set up meetings, which obviously showed that she was ready to take on client duties as a VP. Doing the work of your manager leads to better work, more trust, better deals, bigger bonuses, and faster promotions. Not by being the smartest in the room or fastest in Excel, but by understanding the bigger picture and helping the team think through what needs to happen next. Think about it like this. Technical skills are the bare minimum. Soft skills are what get you promoted and matter even more in the long term. And the skills I've listed today are the ones that all top bankers have. I hope that you not only learned a lot, but actually start to apply these skills in the future, because I genuinely believe they'll be game changers for you if you actually implement them. And before I let you go, if you really want to practice these and learn these soft skills and combine them with technical skills as well, used on real deals, that's exactly what we provide and teach in my mentorship program, the Banking Accelerator. You'll get personalized help through one-on-one coaching with former and current bankers, weekly calls with me, guest speaker sessions with bankers and buy-side investors, over 30 hours of video content, and a full system for the entire banking recruiting process. If you're interested in learning more about how the program works, click the link in the description to book a call with my team. And in the next screen, you're going to see a video about all the technical skills I learned while at JP Morgan to balance out this video. If you found this video helpful, would really appreciate it if you could send it along to one of your friends who really cares about learning and improving in their careers. You can also follow me on Instagram for more recruiting tips and behind the scenes content. With that said, thank you all so much for watching as always, and hope to catch you in the next one.